I'm Dr. Bill Griffin, and I serve as the Vice President for Dental Ministries with the Christian Medical and Dental Associations. It is truly a privilege to serve as your host for this CMDA series, Faith Prescriptions. The mission of Faith Prescriptions, simply put, is to equip healthcare professionals to communicate the love of Christ in word and in deed to our patients, students, and colleagues. Many Christian healthcare professionals I've met over the years may have a sincere, active walk with Jesus Christ, but when they enter their practices, they're not comfortable speaking of faith and its implications. Perhaps they're afraid of offending their patients, or maybe they don't think they have enough time. Or it might be that they just don't feel like they know enough about the spiritual realm. Well, if any of you share these or other apprehensions regarding spiritual interventions with your patients, then this Faith Prescription series was created with you in mind. As you view various segments, you will discover that not only is it appropriate to integrate spiritual care in your treatment of patients, it can also be a very natural process. In fact, most patients want you to talk with them about their spiritual needs. Further, when it comes to communicating God's love to others, there may be no more natural environment than that of healthcare. But you don't have to take my word for it. During this series, you will hear from more than 20 different speakers, most of whom see patients every day just like you do. Our speakers practice in a wide variety of specialties. They represent various ethnicities and personalities, but they all have one thing in common: the passionate desire to provide truly holistic care for their patients. I can't wait for you to hear how God is using them across America to communicate the love of Christ through the care that they provide. There's one more important factor that unites a large majority of our Faith Prescription speakers. Most have received training from one of two CMDA programs that preceded this one, either the Saline Solution or Grace Prescriptions. These teaching materials were developed by Drs. Bill Peel, Walt Larimore, and Gene Rudd, and they've been a great blessing to thousands of Christian doctors around the world. We'll get to hear from Bill Peel and Walt Larimore a bit later in this session. The first teaching program, the Saline Solution, was offered in Asheville, North Carolina in 1995. My wife Linda and I had the pleasure of being two of the 180 or so in attendance. I so enjoyed that first conference, as it both inspired and equipped me to integrate my faith into the care I provided for my patients. So what can you expect from the various segments in Faith Prescriptions? What similarities and what differences exist as compared to the prior programs? First, veterans of the Saline Solution and Grace Prescriptions will recognize many key components from the previous materials: faith flags, faith stories, ethical and legal issues, praying with patients, etc. One of the major differences, however, is that each video in the new series will be shorter, about 15 minutes or so, which is a great length for small group discussions. In fact, each video will include related questions to encourage viewers to apply what's taught to real-life patient situations. A second major difference in the Faith Prescription series is that it will address a broader scope of healthcare topics, things such as treating patients with addictions, missionary treatment, treating the medically underserved, caring for refugees and immigrants, end-of-life care, and other topics. Because each segment is shorter, additional resources will be included for those who want to go a bit deeper. So now let's consider our special calling as healthcare professionals. First of all, we in healthcare have a unique opportunity to see the wonders of God's creative hand. The circulatory system, various specialized organs of the body, the support we receive from our skeletal system, our body's repair process, our cognitive abilities. We, more than any other profession, know the detailed truth of David's words in Psalm 139. We are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made. And when something goes wrong with our physical health, when a bone breaks, when a blood vessel becomes clogged, when a tooth abscesses, we humans become acutely aware of our own mortality. Many over the years have asked in frustration, if there is a God, then why does He allow disease in our lives? One possible answer: to get our attention, to disrupt our misguided sense of self-sufficiency. The writer of the book of Hebrews tells us in chapter 12 that God shakes the earth so that what cannot be shaken may remain. When threats to physical well-being occur, we in healthcare have the distinct privilege of ministering to our patients, of being the healing hands of Jesus to them. And the real beauty of it is that our efforts to treat our patients' physical conditions can open up huge spiritual doors to their even greater needs in the spiritual realm. What an opportunity. As we consider the privilege we have of sharing the good news with our patients, I'd like to mention to you 3 principles that we find taught in the Scriptures. First of all, be flexible. In 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22, the Apostle Paul says, "I have become all things to all people, that by all means I might save some." So if we are serious about showing others the love of Christ, we will adapt as much as we can to their needs and their circumstances. Jesus left heaven for us, and He calls us to go and do likewise. In addition to our calling to be flexible, the Scriptures also call us to be firm. What do I mean by that? Well, this same Apostle Paul tells us in Galatians chapter 1, if anyone is preaching to you a gospel contrary to the one you received, let him be accursed. He says this twice, and we need to recognize the serious nature of this warning. So what essential elements of the gospel should we not be willing to bend? In what areas should we avoid compromise? I'll stop for now because this will be one of your discussion questions. A third principle that I will mention is that as we seek to communicate the love of Christ, anticipate opposition. Remember that the gospel, the greatest news we could ever imagine, is foolishness to many who do not yet believe. As we look to share the love of God with others, Jesus has promised us that we will indeed face opposition. Be encouraged by the example of Jeremiah. He faced great hardship and persecution, certainly more than any of us ever will. And at times, he was tempted to just put a lid on it, to stop proclaiming God's truth. But we read in Jeremiah chapter 20, verse 9, "If I say I will not mention him or speak any more in his name, there is in my heart as it were a burning fire shut up in my bones, and I am weary of holding it in, and I cannot." My prayer for you is that whatever external opposition you might face in sharing God's love with others will be overwhelmed by the powerful work that God has done and is still doing in your life. How He has called you from darkness into His marvelous light. How He's welcomed you as His son or daughter. How He's promised you that no one shall snatch you out of His hand. May the powerful love of Christ be what controls you as you serve Him in your chosen profession. Let's hear now from Dr. Bill Peel and Dr. Walt Larimore, the two who have inspired so many over the years to integrate the love of Christ into the treatment of their patients.
Hi, I'm Dr. Bill Peel. Now, I'm a doctor of theology, not a doctor of medicine, so don't come see me with your aches and pains. But in the mid-1990s, I was working as the Mid-South Regional Director for CMDA. And as I visited with physicians and dentists throughout my region, asking them, how can we really serve you? They came back pretty regularly with this comment, help us to make our practice a ministry. And when I drilled down into that, I found out what they were really asking is, how do we talk about Jesus with our patients? That's part of the reason why we actually went into medicine. And so I went to the leadership of CMDA, Gene Rudd and Dr. David Stevens, and they said, go for it. Wayne Sanders introduced me to Walt Larimore. And so we got together. I brought the theology, Walt brought the practice, and we concocted the first saline solution conference in 1995 for CMDA.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Walt Larimore. I'm a family physician in Colorado. But back about 25 years ago, I was a family physician in Florida, trying to figure out with my partner, how do we bring Christ into the exam room with each patient when indicated and when appropriate, not just in our hearts, but in the history taking and in our discussions with patients and in the prescriptions that we wrote them. And I was so blessed to meet a CMDA staff member by the name of Bill Peel, who shared this same heart. And together we authored and piloted the first of the saline solutions, how to bring Christ into a busy practice, back in the 80s. And then that evolved into the Grace Prescriptions program in the 90s, and now has gone around the world, giving practitioners, real doctors, some how-tos that they can consider to bring Christ into their busy practices.
Having worked in the area of bringing faith into the workplace for almost 35 years now, I can tell you that the workplace is the most strategic venue for the spread of the gospel. And within that opportunity, I believe that the most incredibly strategic place for the spread of the gospel worldwide is the medical workplace. You have opportunities with your patients because of the way they come to you, sometimes very vulnerably, and you don't want to take advantage of that. But you also want to see that they need the love of Jesus Christ more than ever. And they come to you in a time when they are most receptive to hear about that, if they see the love of Christ exhibited in your life.
I think one of the most wonderful things that happened to me personally as I began to practice these principles day to day was that I was no longer a doctor who just happened to be a Christian, but I was a Christian who just happened to be a doctor. In other words, the Christian part of me was the foundation for everything that I did and said. And that allowed Christ to bear fruit in me and through me that I don't think he could have any other way. And I pray the same thing happens in doctors, not only across our country, but around the world.
In closing, I'd like to tell you about a former patient of mine. Her name is Crystal. Crystal was about 16 when I first began to treat her. She had a high rate of decay, requiring a lot of dental work. Many fillings, a few crowns, plus 2 root canals. And as we sought to meet her dental needs, our team also made an effort to show her a kindness and compassion that could perhaps point her to the love of Jesus Christ. It didn't seem to be having much of an effect on her, however. And there came a point when she began requesting pain prescriptions that seemed to go beyond what she should have needed. Eventually, it got to the point where I made a difficult decision to dismiss her from the practice. It was a difficult decision because I felt like our efforts to show love to her had failed, and that we would likely not be seeing her again. Soon thereafter, her marriage ended. Her son was taken away from her. She ended up in jail. And through these experiences, she came to know the saving power of Jesus Christ in her life. The next time I saw her, it was clear that the Lord had gotten hold of her, and future visits confirmed that she was indeed a new creature in Christ. It's interesting that what Crystal initially sought was a prescription for pain, but her ultimate need was for a prescription for faith, a faith prescription. And God filled her request like no one else could. You can read more about Crystal's story in a CMDA article accompanying this video. Finally, many in our profession suffer from burnout, including perhaps some watching this video right now. Some days we aren't quite as enthralled with our jobs as we thought we'd be when we entered into our training. I can't help but believe that one of the biggest reasons, perhaps the biggest reason, is that we at times forget that our patients are more than just flesh and blood, that our calling to minister to them goes beyond the treatment of physical disease. In Psalm 90, Moses prays, "Let the favor of the Lord our God be upon us, and confirm for us the work of our hands." Yes, confirm the work of our hands. As we seek to walk with our patients through both their physical and their spiritual challenges, as we share with them the love of Christ in word and in deed, I believe the Lord will indeed confirm for us the work of our hands. So enjoy this video series, invite others to join you in your quest to provide truly holistic care, and look forward to discovering how the Lord will use you to communicate His indescribable love to patients and colleagues in the years to come.